This man cannot remain in power.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. And today's video, I've got a packed show for you today. I'm going to be talking mainly about Biden, his decision to release a lot of oil reserves. We're talking about 180 million barrels. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm also going to be talking about Biden's bill as well, and the fact that he's increasing the military spending, and he's also sending a lot of money to Ukraine while his people back home in America are suffering. You have American veterans who have come from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan with injuries, with PTSD, with no help whatsoever. You have people homeless in the American streets. It's absolutely filthy. Some of these big cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, just full of homeless in the streets, and that number is getting higher and higher. You got a huge drugs problem, epidemic. You got pandemic as well. You got the high inflations, you got the high crime rates. There's a lot of issues. The crumbling of the infrastructure all over America. There's so many issues I can name. I'm also going to be talking about China's recent summit with the EU leaders. And this was a very, very interesting summit. It was supposed to be about investments with China, and instead it became mainly a discussion about Ukraine. And President Xi was not happy, and he told the EU leaders in their face, stop being such a puppet of the United States. He basically told that in diplomatic terms, and I will discuss it later on. Finally, I want to ask for a quick favor. I'm on 48 patrons at the moment. Let's try and make it up to the number 50. I would really appreciate it. And also you can buy me a coffee if you feel that's more appropriate. And for the rest of you, if I can ask you to carry on what you're doing, it's really, really important. You like, share, and make sure you're still subscribed. It's really, really good for the algorithm, really pushes the video out there. So I really appreciate you guys doing that as well. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. So before I start with the main show, I'm going to give you a quick update on Russia's requirement to pay for the gas in rubles. Otherwise, they're going to cut the gas off. So I believe they have come to an agreement of some sorts. This is the agreement. So notifications about the new payment order are being sent to customers on Friday. The Russian gas giant said in a statement on the official Telegram channel, Kremlin said that the European buyers would need to have two accounts, one in euros and one in rubles, and the Gazprom bank would be responsible for making the foreign exchange conversion. Austria's OMV AG and Italy's ENI confirmed they have received the information. So what this means is all of the European gas customers will have two accounts, one European account which settles in euros, and one account which settles in rubles, and Gazprom Bank would be making that conversion. So these companies will still be able to pay in euros, but Gazprom Bank will convert that into rubles, and they can basically do it that way. So this is good for a number of ways. Number one, Gazprom Bank would be responsible for making the exchange, foreign exchange. So this means they can charge whatever exchange rate they want, you know, basically because they are in charge of the exchange. So they can say 1 euro equals 1 ruble, for example. So they can make whatever exchange they want. There is no, you know, written guarantee or contract to say this is the set exchange rate. That's not going to happen. Basically, they will basically set whatever exchange rate they want. So that means they will make more money from this gas, they will make bigger profits, and also they will improve the strength of the ruble as well. So it is a win-win for everybody. It's a win for Russia. It is a kind of win for Europe, but I guess they're gonna have to pay more because of the exchange rate, but they need the gas, so they can't really complain. So one of my questions is, what is Russia going to do with these euros? Because if Gazprom Bank takes in these euros and converts it to rubles, they will still have all of these euros left over, and they can't really use euros much because they're pretty much useless at the moment because of all the sanctions. They can't really go to Europe and buy European goods or stocks or bonds or investments with the euros, so they'll be quite useless. But then I thought about China, and I'll probably think that Russia will probably sell a lot of these euros to China, or they'll probably keep them until the sanctions have ended, or they will keep these euros as foreign currency. Sometimes you need foreign currency in your country to strengthen your own ruble as well, so they'll probably keep that secure somewhere. So we'll see. I mean, it's not really clear what they're going to do with the euros, but I'm sure more information will come out very soon. So back to the main story. Biden blames Covid and Putin for the soaring gas prices, admits it's hard to tell when they will go down, and says Americans will save $80 a month if they buy an electric car, as it unveils plans to reduce pain at the pumps. President Biden announced the release of 180 million barrels of oil over 6 months from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve later on Thursday. So there's so much to take away from this article, and I'm going to try and summarize it all, and I'll give you my own opinions as well. So first of all, Biden announced a release of 180 million barrels over 6 months, which equates to about 1 million barrels per day. So the number one reason, and the main reason he's doing this, is because he has midterms by the end of the year, and he wants to look good for the polls, and having high gas prices is a big no-no to the American people, and he's got really big chance of, or his Democrat Party has got a really big chance of losing in the midterms and losing a lot of seats as well. So this is one of the main reasons he's doing this. As you know, inflation is a huge problem, and his approval rate is around just over 30%, and it's not going up, even including all the stuff that's happening in Ukraine. So he was hoping he'd be some sort of war president, and he can rally the American people and get people to approve for him, but it hasn't worked. His approval ratings are, I think, is between 34% and 36%, and it's actually going lower. Inflation is a huge problem. There has been a lot of pandemic disruptions as well, and there's a huge issue in America. There's a lot of crime, there's a lot of homelessness, and crime has got so bad that, you know, some shoplifting crimes are not reported anymore. So they don't even bother with any small crimes anymore. And also there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment where people are stealing each other's gas or petrol. They're basically drilling holes in trucks and stealing all the gas and petrol, and that seems to be going on all over America. A few months ago, people were stealing parcels and post from the trains. So there are a lot of issues happening at the moment, and if Biden doesn't do anything soon, things will spiral out of control, and these things will probably head into riots. So inflation is a huge problem at the moment. Gas price is huge. You know, Americans are not used to paying huge gas prices, and one of the big major problems America has got is it doesn't really have the infrastructure for rail. People love their cars, so they travel long distances with their cars, and the way the American cities have been designed, you need a car to travel everywhere. So when you live in the suburbs or a city, there's no public transport nearby. There's not really many buses or trains, so you need a car to basically travel to places. And if you want to travel from city to city, you need to travel by the highway, because they don't really have high-speed rail like China does, for example. So America is basically heavily reliant on cars. And also another thing, people love their cars in America, and they love their gas guzzlers, as they say. They love their pickup trucks, and these cars, they're 6-liter, 8-liter engines. You know, they love their big cars, they love their big engines, and you know, basically these are huge cars which drink a lot of petrol. It was fine back in the day, you know, 30, 40 years ago, even 50 years ago, and when American cars were big and very, you take up huge amounts of gas. But petrol was cheap back in the day. You know, gas was cheap, so they could afford it. But nowadays, with all of these big cars that Americans love driving, they just can't afford it with the gas prices. It's absolutely ridiculous how big some of these American cars are. So here are my opinions. First of all, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's going to bring down the petrol prices at all. So the petrol prices have gone down a little bit, but it's not because of Biden announcing this. It's because China is in lockdown at the moment, and some of its major cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen are hugely affected. They're under lockdowns. And when you have two major cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen under lockdown, then the gas prices will go down because there's less demand for gas, because a lot of the industries in there are shut down. So I believe Shenzhen is on its way back to normal now, but Shanghai is in the process of still being locked down, and that's probably going to take another week or so. So after a week, I can see the prices starting to shoot up again, because the demand for energy is going to rise once these lockdowns have ended. So it's not because of Biden, it's actually because of China. And the fact that Biden is releasing all of these reserves is just it's just a bad idea. Basically, these are emergency reserves for wartime, or if America really needs it. And what he's going to do is get rid of these reserves. And how is he going to replace them? He can't replace them. He has to pay more to replace these reserves, because the gas oil prices are just going to go up for a number of reasons. Russia's crude output will drop 3 million barrels per day in April, and that's already happening at the moment. The figures are there. And America is talking about releasing 1 million barrels a day in April. And that's just not going to be enough, because you're still replacing 1/3 of what's going to be lost in Russia. And then once the lockdowns in China have completed and it's over, there's going to be a huge demand for oil and gas again, and the prices are just going to start shooting up. They're going to go 130, 140, even 150 by May. I guarantee you that. And not only China, but the rest of the world is just coming out of the pandemic, and a lot of countries are still not running in full capacity yet in terms of the factories and things like that. So a lot of factories will start moving into full gear, and again you will need more gas and oil. So things are not looking good for Biden. I don't think this is going to work. And also I want to talk about his advice for people to switch to electric cars. And in America, electric cars, you know, we're talking about $80,000 to $100,000, could be more. I mean, Chinese electric cars are quite cheap, but in America you still got Tesla, and Tesla is bloody expensive, absolutely expensive. You can't get one cheaper than 100 grand. You know, you'd be lucky to get a second-hand one for 80 grand. And he's expecting people to buy electric cars at a time when inflation is soaring, the cost of living crisis, people don't have the money, interest rates are rising, so they have to pay more for their mortgages, for their rent, for the loans. You know, people just don't have that kind of money lying around anymore, especially not at this time. You know, they're really, really close to going into recession, and they're asking people to cough up 80 to 100 grand for a new electric car. And even if they buy a new electric car, where's the infrastructure? America still does not have the infrastructure for electric cars. It does not. And I'm going to make a separate video about this, and I will show it to you. They just don't have enough charging points. They don't have enough fast chargers. And if you're in the city, you know, you're having to wait 8 to 10 hours to charge your car. You know, it's ridiculous, and it's really, really expensive, the charging points in America. And one other problem America has got, there's a huge amounts of vandalism going on in electric car charging points, and people are stealing parts from these vandalize electric car charging points, and they're stealing the wires, and they're selling it on the black market because it's quite expensive, these wires that come with it. So there's huge amounts of problems in America, and there is no way they can get people on electric cars, and there is no way without the infrastructure this will ever work. So these ideas are just not going to work at all. So moving on to the next story, there's a lot of environmentalists and a lot of people around America who are completely against what's going on at the moment. And still to this day, they are saying that these oil companies are making vast profits. And you can see here, they're making vast profits while consumers are subjected to soaring gas prices. And it's the same in UK. You've got Shell and BP in UK who are making billions and billions in profits while the people are having to pay for the higher gas prices. And it's the same in America. You've got the corporate companies which are still making billions, and the people who are having to pay for it all. And again, you got problems with shale gas and fracking as well. The fracking causes huge environmental damage. And this year, what Biden is doing, he's ramping up oil production and he's giving licenses to a lot more fracking companies as well. And these companies are going to destroy the environment, because fracking destroys the environment. It contaminates the water as well, causes earthquakes. There's a lot of issues with fracking, and but because they make the money, they get away with it, and people are suffering, and all over America, waters are being contaminated, and there's huge issues they are not addressing, as long as they are making the money from it, and as long as they're making the profits. So this is going to come back to haunt them. And as a summary, I don't think any of these measures are going to work. I think the oil prices will continue to rise. I think Biden's approval ratings will continue to go down. And I think Democrats will lose heavily in the midterms, heavily. And I just don't think any of these things are going to fix it. The Americans are also destroying their own environment with all these fracking stuff. And it can't be good for the environment or climate change either. All of these promises they made about being carbon neutral by 2030, I think it's all fake. It's all going to be thrown out the window. By 2030, it's only 8 years away. By the time 2030 comes, they'll realize they haven't taken enough action. The world is more in need of fossil fuels and ramping up production of fossil fuels rather than going away from it. So we've only got 8 years left. I don't think the West will be carbon neutral by 2030. I think it's going to take much longer, and we're going to be hitting some points where the Earth is starting to be 2 degrees hotter. At the moment it's 1.5 degrees. So once it starts getting 2 degrees hotter, the ice caps are going to start melting, and it's going to cause a lot of issues with increased sea levels and many other problems as well. So let's move on to Biden's defense budget. And you can see by the defense budget, it's gone up 813 billion, almost 60 billion more than which was requested a year ago. So 813 billion is ridiculous amounts. And don't forget, this amount doesn't really take into account inflation as well. So the cost of inflation has shot up. So things will be much more expensive. It'll be more expensive to make a jet, for example. It'll be more expensive to make a ship because all the good, raw materials and shipping and all of the stuff that you need to make it is everything's shooting up and going up. So even though they've increased this budget, it's still not going to be enough because everything's getting more expensive. Biden promised the American people that is really expensive in Afghanistan, and he doesn't want to spend any more money on Afghanistan, so they had to pull their troops out. And he's pulled out of Afghanistan, but why is the defense spending is still going up? So the fact that he's lied, it wasn't anything about saving money or helping the people of Afghanistan. The defense budget is still going up, it's still shooting up, and it just shows that they are looking for bigger things, and I think they have eyes on China, and they are kind of building up their military for a probably possible war with China over Taiwan. So let's hope that day never comes, but I believe Americans will keep on spending and spending and prepare for a war with China if that ever happens. Biden is also sending a lot of money to Ukraine. You can see additional 682 million, and here it says additional 380 million, and that's on top of 13.6 billion that he has already sent to Ukraine. So that's a lot of money. You know, we're talking about nearly 15 billion in total. And you know, you have people in America who are suffering. You have veterans out in the streets. You have homeless people in the streets. You have people with drug issues. You know, you have infrastructure issues. There's a lot of problems in America. I just don't understand why Biden is getting involved in Ukraine and spending money and paying money into Ukraine. Ukraine is lost. You know, there is no way Ukraine can win in this war with Russia. Ukraine has lost. And they're just throwing money away for no reason. No reason whatsoever. I mean, I don't understand why he has to keep sending money to Ukraine when America is suffering so much at the moment. And this is why his approval ratings are not going up, because people's lives are getting worse by the day, and all he's doing is sending money to Ukraine. And American people right now, they don't care about Ukraine. They care about, you know, gas prices. They care about their own life and their own security and inflation. And I just don't understand. He's completely got his priorities wrong, completely. So Biden again has asked Saudi Arabia and UAE for help to increase their oil output, and again they have rebuffed him. They've not even picking up his calls, and this article was made today, Sunday 3rd of April, and so Biden's, you know, asking for Saudis for help, UAE for help, and they're not going to give it. So I've already made a video about this a few days ago, and the reason Saudi is not going to give it is because of the JCPOA, the deal that America's nearly going to be signing with the JCPOA. Biden's also taken a lot of anti-aircraft, anti-missile batteries, Patriot batteries from Saudi as well. He's taken them off, and because of that, the Houthis have been very daring and blowing up Saudi oil installations and refineries because of it. So the Saudis are not very happy at all, because they feel that Americans have gone back on their word of protecting Saudi Arabia, while, you know, the deal was for Saudi to sell oil in dollars, so it's become like the petrodollar, and in return Americans will protect Saudi at all costs. So Saudis feel very, very much let down by the Americans, and they feel like they've gone back on their word. And you can see some of these statements are very, very strong statements. You can see the Saudi counterpart has said, this is the end of the road for us and Biden, and maybe the US also. So there's a couple of things really. They said, the Saudi-US relationship is on a throes of crisis, he wrote. I am increasingly disturbed by the unreality of the American discussion about the subject, which fails to acknowledge how deep and serious the rift has grown. A more realistic discussion should focus on one word, divorce. When Barack Obama negotiated a nuclear deal with Iran, we Saudis understood him to be seeking the breakup of a 70-year marriage. How can we not? After all, the flaws in the deal are well known. It paves the way for Iran to have a nuclear bomb. It fills the war chest of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and has spread militias across the Arab world, armed with precision-guided munitions to maim and kill people, which formerly looked to America to help guarantee their safety. Why should America's regional allies help Washington contain Russia in Europe when Washington is strengthening Russia and Iran in the Middle East? So you can see they're not very happy at all. They basically want a divorce from America, and this is going to be the end of the road between America's relationship and Saudi relationship. And the fact that Saudis are willing to start selling oil in RMB, in Chinese yuan, then, you know, it shows that how serious they are and how serious this relationship is not going to be fixed very soon. So things are not looking good for Biden at all. And again, his foreign policy has been shambolic. He has literally, since he's been in office, he's pissed off the Chinese. He's obviously not getting along well with the Russians, but he's also pissed off all of the Arabs in the Arabian state. The Africans he's pretty much ignored. Southeast Asia, most of the countries don't like Biden, and he managed to get Singapore on board with him by force, but then he's still got his allies, I guess, in the West and South Korea and Japan. And when these countries have placed all of these sanctions on Russia, there's about 40 countries, but there's almost like 192, 193 countries around the world, and 40 minus 190, you know, you still got majority of the world, majority of the countries who are not placing sanctions on Russia. And some of these countries are huge. You're talking about China, you're talking about India. So you got 1.4 billion people each in each of those countries. So you got 2.8 billion people not sanctioning Russia just for two countries alone. Then you got all of these people in the Middle East, and, you know, majority of the population, and we're talking about 80 to 90% of the population, has not sanctioned Russia. So that's why sanctions are not going to work. It's just the collective West that have sanctioned Russia, and this is why it's backfiring on them. This is why the ruble hasn't collapsed, and they have sanctioned Russia so bad. They have sanctioned themselves, and they just don't know what to do. They're literally clueless. So you see articles such as this, and it's because of reasons like this that you can understand why Saudis are not picking up the phone from Biden, or why they don't want to have anything to do with Biden. And these Houthi militias are targeting Saudi oil installations after being removed from the terror list by Biden. So Bidens have removed the Houthis from the terror list. So steps like that is just going to annoy the Saudis even more, and it's just going to push away the Saudis away from the Americans. It just shows Americans can't be trusted, and we need to look for new relationships, especially towards China. And this is the main problem with America, really. They're your friends until the day they decide to backstab you, or they don't need you anymore, and they just spit you out and step on you afterwards. So I'm going to go to the next story. This is quite a major story, and it's not really been reported much on the news lately, but it is reported if you really look for it. But you won't find it in many mainstream news articles or American articles, even British articles. You have to kind of look for independent news channels for things like this. So the European Union had a summit meeting with China, with President Xi, and he says European Union demanded, can you see the word demanded, that China not boycott sanctions against Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. So they basically had a meeting with President Xi, and they boycotted the meeting. They pretended to talk about the European and Chinese investment deal, and this investment deal has been on hold now for over a year. The Europeans have pretty much put it under the carpet and forgotten about it, because this deal was signed when Angela Merkel was around, and at the time when President Bush lost to President Biden and Biden was coming into office, they had a meeting at the time, because the Europeans and the Chinese, and they agreed to this deal. And since then, the Americans have pretty much said, we're not happy with this deal, you need to cancel it. And the Europeans had placed these fake sanctions, unilateral sanctions on China, based on lies about Xinjiang and things like that. And in return, China placed sanctions back on the Europeans. And because of that, because of what happened, because they placed these sanctions back on the Europeans, the Europeans have said, all right, we're not gonna sign this deal. until you take away these sanctions from these European ministers. China refused because they said, you guys place sanctions on us first, and this was a tit for tat. So that's where it was. So this summit was supposed to talk about that deal. Instead, they decided to mainly talk about Ukraine, and Ursula, who is a complete puppet of Biden. You could see her a few days ago when she signed a deal with Biden, with the LNG deal, and she kept looking back at him and saying, oh, we love buying things from friends that we trust. And, you know, she was completely kissing his ass, you know, completely. And this meeting was completely hijacked, and President Xi was pretty much shocked by it all, and he wasn't very happy. And at the end of the meeting, apparently he said to them in their face, you know, stop being such a puppet of the United States, in diplomatic terms, basically. So basically, in diplomatic terms, he says he encourages bloc to take primary role for Ukraine resolution and be independent and form independent views about Ukraine and about China. So he's basically said not to be such a puppet of the United States, start being, start having your own independent foreign policy. That's what he's trying to say to them, and stop being such a puppet. So the Europeans have pretty much came up with a big list of laundry basket items to China. And they're saying, you must do this, you must do that. And you can see here Ursula's Twitter page. And in her Twitter page, the first thing you see is the Stand Up for Ukraine banners, and she's obviously, you can tell she's not really biased. She's obviously knows what the important things are. So she's gone to this Chinese meeting, and she's completely ransacked the meeting, talking about Ukraine, you know, and threatening China not to help Russia and things like that. And you can see a big laundry list of items. Stop his unjustified trade measures against Lithuania. Lithuania is the country which actually disbanded the One China policy. So the fact that they've disbanded the One China policy, obviously China's not going to be happy with that. So they have fought back, and they have put trade embargoes on Lithuania, and that's for a good thing. They don't want all the European countries to do the same. And this One China policy is a very, very important policy for China. And Americans and most of the Europeans are still following this One China policy. Lithuania, they've used as a little goat to basically not use the One China policy, and now Lithuania is getting punished from it, from China. And she says stop its unjustified trade measures against Lithuania. Well, it's not unjustified, these are justified. You know, One China policy has been signed by the Americans, by the Europeans, and is still law to this day. So the fact that she says it's unjustified shows that she doesn't know what she's talking about, and she's completely out of touch. She says lift sanctions against MEPs. So these sanctions that China has placed on these MEPs were in retaliation for European sanctions on China. So she needs to lift those sanctions first before China will do the same. So it's nothing about her lifting her sanctions. It's all about China doing its bit. So he says address global concerns on human rights and labor rights, especially in Xinjiang. Again, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She needs to visit Xinjiang. The AP, Associated Press, you know, basically have said there's no genocide going on in Xinjiang. It's all a bunch of lies. There's people and MPs going into Xinjiang saying it's all a bunch of lies made up by the US to undermine China. And again, she's, you know, basically talking about that. She says improve access and conditions for EU companies in its market. So these improvements and access conditions are part of the investment deal that they signed, which the Europeans have not ratified yet. So if they ratified this deal, all of these improved access and conditions will be fixed. Because I've made a few videos about this. Basically, this investment deal goes both ways, not just for Chinese investments coming into Europe, but European investments going into China. And it basically gives an even playing field for all companies from both sides. and this basically improves conditions and access to all European companies going into China. So if she actually signed this deal, everything would have been okay. So she does not know what she's talking about. So the meeting was also shared by this guy as well, the European Council President Charles Michel, and even he's a puppet as well, and he made this comment. He stressed that China, as a member of the UN Security Council, has a particular responsibility in the architecture of peace and the rule-based international order. So can you see the problem with this statement? The rule-based international order is the US international order. Well, first of all, the UN Security Council doesn't go with the rule-based international order. It's got its own international rules-based order. So that's a completely different thing. If you do some research on this, you will find that rule-based international order is an order made up by the United States. And basically, you got to follow the United States rules. Otherwise, you know, you're not part of the rules-based order. And this is something that, you know, has started ever since the Iraq War, where the basically the Americans got into Iraq and got into Afghanistan unilaterally without the UN. So they've basically made up their own rule-based international order, which is basically about American rules. So the UN does not follow this charter, and it has got its own international rules. And basically this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's shown to be a complete puppet. The fact that he's using the rule-based international order shows that the EU are complete puppets of the Americans, and they don't really follow the UN, and you know, things like that. It just shows you got to look and read between the lines about what they say and how they kind of run things. So can you see some of the words that Ursula has been using to China? And again, I'm going back to Ursula's dirty laundry basket items, and it says here, China must. Can you see the words that she used? It's like you must do this, you must do that. Can you see her using any of these words to America or to Biden? Hell no. You know, this goes back to the colonial mentality where, you know, the Europeans think they're superior to the Chinese or the Indians or Africans, and they use such words like you must do this, you must do that, you must do that. What about European must do this? What about NATO must do this? What about Americans must do this? Do any of these Europeans use any words like this when America invaded Iraq or Afghanistan? No, hell no. And it shows, you know, basically how European leaders think, and it's such lack of respect to President Xi. And President Xi, you know, is basically told them in their face that these guys are just puppets. You're just puppets of the United States following their orders. So they've started this summit pretending to talk about the China and the European investment deal, and instead they ransacked it with talking about Ukraine. And again, you can see how, you know, she's basically, all of her Twitter pages about stand up for Ukraine, you stand up for Ukraine. So she didn't really care about anything about investment deals with China. All she wanted to do is get China on board with the rest of the West, you know, putting sanctions on Russia, because they know these sanctions have not worked. These Western sanctions on Russia have not worked at all. So they want China to put sanctions on Russia. They want China to stop supporting Russia. Well, that's not going to happen. And I can tell that Ursula has been sent by Biden to do this. It's only a few days ago Ursula was, you know, cozying up to Biden, saying, oh, we love our friends that we trust, we love buying 10 times more expensive LNG gas from you because you guys are our friends and you guys are helping us, selling such expensive, you know, gas which is going to completely destroy our economy, but we don't care because you are our friends. So I can tell a few days ago Biden must have told Ursula, you need to have a phone call with President Xi, keep the pressure up on Ukraine, pretend to talk about the investment deal, but, you know, basically say to him that if you can basically turn your back on Russia, we will sign this investment deal, blah blah blah. So Biden must have told her to do this, and she's doing it right now. And again, this has come out a complete failure, because this is not a way to talk to the Chinese. This comes out very, very insulting, very insulted to President Xi, to the Chinese people. She must think the Chinese people are really stupid, that they will backstab their friends Russia just to please the West. And you can see the way the West are just talking down to China. You must do this, you must do that. It's really, really insulting. This is not a way to talk to the Chinese. You know, this is completely out of order. And the fact that this woman, oh my God, she really needs to go. She does not know any form of diplomacy whatsoever. It's almost like, you know, you have a summit meeting with somebody, and normally, you know, the country will send out a press conference and they'll make a press statement, and there'll be some meetings on the website discussing what you've talked about, and you try and be diplomatic. So what this woman is doing is basically putting stuff like this on her Twitter account, basically saying China must do this, China must do that, China must do this. Why is she doing that for? Only because she wants to look good in front of Biden or all of these anti-Chinese bashers out there. So she says, oh yeah, look at me, I bashed China. I met with President Xi and I told him this and I told him that. I said you must do this, you must do that, you must do this. And just to, you know, pick up some brownie points. You know, for her to be bashing China, saying, yeah, look at me, I did this, I told Biden, you know, I told President Xi this in front of his face. Yeah, vote for me again, yeah, please. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous how these diplomats act. It's disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. I've never seen anything like it. This is the worst diplomacy or the worst European leader I've ever seen. On that note, guys, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to reading your messages on the comment section. So take care for now, and I'll see you soon.